Yep. It's another Redeemed Conversations. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. So, I know many of you saw the topic for this evening, and as promised, I spoke a little earlier this week, and I said, we're gonna start talking about relationships. And who don't want to talk about relationships? So I am in the process of pulling up my notes and doing my due diligent checks on things and seeing where things are. And Anyway, so we are again live today on Redeemed Conversations with your boy. And so we are talking about relationships. Now, when it comes to relationships, I struggle talking about relationships because when it comes to it's almost a topic everybody talks about. Everybody wants to be um, everybody wants to be a professional or a expert on. But the truth is, I think many of us miss the point of being an expert about how we are in relationships and what we do in relationships. So, I got to start there. I am in Dr. Maxwell's book right now, 15 Invaluable Laws of Leadership. I believe it's Invaluable Laws of Leadership. No, of growth. I'm sorry, of growth. And the one was the law of awareness. And I said to myself, now, Dr. Maxwell, you about done got me good, sir, because you are now letting me know that to be rooted in self awareness allows you to then progress towards a place of freedom and understanding of yourself. Now, what is the actual relevant nature of that? You know, where does that come from? Where do we do that? You know, can you honestly say that when it comes to having meaningful and lovely, awesome relationships, that you know how you are perceived in the relationship? Now, I promise to make it juicy. I do. I promise to make it juicy. I promise to make it a conversation to where we are able to talk about not just knowing yourself, but knowing how you are relevant and your natural self is relevant to others. And that's the part that I wanted to talk about today. Because when you have the opportunity to see yourself in the mirror, you have the opportunity to see yourself as someone who says, you know what? I see me, and when I see me, I think these things of myself. You know, and we often talk about how the relationship with oneself is one of the first most important relationships that you will have to master, and then it's your relationship with God and relationship with your family. However, when you are down the road of really understanding what does it look like to be in relationship with yourself, and then wanting to look like what it means to be in relationship with others, I think often we have the misconceived notion that my thought and where I am and what I'm thinking is what others are thinking. Now, neither here nor there. But let's talk about a few different little nuggets that I wanted to share. I won't keep you on here long. I do want to just give us some food for thought. So, um, the scripture that I was contemplating on was where am I? Go back to my Bible. There goes my Bible. Yes, Proverbs 18:22, and it says, "The man who finds a wife finds a treasure," or in some translations says, "finds a good thing," and he receives favor from the Lord. Now, I told you I'd make it juicy, and I want to make it juicy. So, let's get to squeezing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the conversation of being relevant to those who are closest to you. And yes, how are you relevant in your marriage? How are you relevant in your relationship? You see, because I think we often go down the road of trying to see how others relate to us, and we often see how others are making us feel. But have we ever asked a question to ourselves? How am I making my loved one feel? How am I making my spouse, my wife, my brother, my sister, my child, my parent, how am I making them feel? And I don't know if that's a question that many people have honestly answered among themselves, but here are a few tips that I wanted to just kind of bring up to go down the road of self evaluation of your relevance in your relationship. Number one, when you get down to the point of why are you in relationship with this person? Yes, we can say it's about because I'm married, or how can I not be in a relationship? I birthed them, or where else would I look for a brotherly relationship other than my brother? Yes. Now, what does it mean, and how does it feel for you to be in a relationship with someone? Now, I can only talk from example. You know, in the first parts of my marriage, beginning parts of my marriage. Now, I've always been a young man who believed in marriage, wanted to be a great husband and a great dad. And in doing all of that, I thought I knew what the right things that a husband needed to do. And then I never did the research about how I husband. Is that a good way to say it? Or how I was a husband? Is that a good way to say it? Yeah. So I didn't really get a chance to really ask myself, okay, well, what kind of husband are you? Because here are some steps. You have to know what kind of husband you are so that you know what kind of wife you have to find. You then have to know what kind of wife you have to find so that you know what kind of husband you need to be so that you can be in the path of finding said wife. And I didn't do that due diligence when I first started my marriage. I didn't. When it came down to it, I think I put myself in a category of okay. You know, I had companies, I had some money, I had a home, I had things going on. I was kind of saved, you know what I mean by kind of saved. So it just was. It wasn't. I can't say that I was everything that I wanted to be, but hell, I was everything I think a wife would want. Yeah, until I got a wife, and then she was like, "Hey, bruh, this, and this," and it really wasn't nuances that she was referring to. It wasn't about clothes on the floor, about leaving the toilet seat up. I didn't do that. If my wife is listening, don't comment. Um, but it was nuances of how I spoke to her. You know, and I was never dogmatic or anything of that nature. But how you speak, you have to know how words come out of your mouth. You have to know what it sounds like to hear words coming from yourself. Now, if you've never done that, you have to do the due diligence and the research to say to yourself, okay, what does words feel like coming from me? I encourage you to do your best to figure out what your words feel like to those that you love around you. Now, when I say that, we often say, well, I say it out of love or I say it out of 100% truth and no cap. And when you think about it, again, going back to examples, you know, I remember one time that it was a pivotal time in my marriage. My wife and I at the time, we were talking about, um, she was my fiance at the time, and we were talking about vows and getting married and the wedding, and I was so adamant about being baptized before I got married, or before we got married, and both of us being baptized before we got married. And I'm pressuring her, and pressuring her. And it became an argument that stemmed over weeks, you know? And there was one day when we were in the hallway of the house, she says to me, "You're asking me to do something that I still don't even know what it means fully." And that rocked me because I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was encouraging her to do the right thing. I thought by me doing it and taking a stand doing it. But I didn't do the due diligence. And then I realized that sometimes when others are in relationships with me, sometimes I can skip steps, right? And I love reading about things like this because this is where I learned um, the law of the buy-in, and um, Dr. Maxwell says you have to ask people for their heart before you can ask them for their hand. And then you think about that, and I was like, I'm asking her for an action, not thinking about her heart. But I had great intentions. Now, I think one of the things that taught me in my marriage was you have to know that as you are progressing in marriage, that you're not going to have everything right. You're not going to get everything right. And to first have some boundaries in place to say what it is that I've prioritized in the midst of our relationship. Those are one of the things that allow you to understand how relevant you can be in relationship with someone. Now, it took me a long time to get to that, but if you think about it, your relevance is always going to be stemmed from what it is you make them feel or push them to feel. So if you're pushing someone to feel anger, if you're pushing someone to feel resentment, and you might not know it, but then you don't realize that there's arguments that keep transpiring because you don't really know what your words are doing to each other. That's a place in any relationship that is a sticky situation. It's a sticky situation. So when you think about that, you then say to yourself, all right, I am going to find out how I am going to speak to people, right? So I'm going to do the necessary work to talk to myself before talking to others and make sure that what comes out of my mouth is of worth, of notoriety, of some kind of relevance to who I'm speaking to. Now, let's go on to point two. Point two then says when you do that level of due diligence, you have to be mindful of who you are doing that for. Now, I told you we get juicy. I brought up in one of my posts earlier, um, Les Brown calls it OQP, only quality people. And so then you ask yourself, am I engaging with quality people? And how many quality people do I have around me? And if I am looking and understand what I mean by quality person, only quality person, it is a person who believes in understanding and polishing the value that they bring to you or to the world to make sure that it is of quality. So then if you have somebody who does that, then doing that level of due diligence for your personal self before having a relationship with them, it allows there to be a great cycle of reciprocity, of respect, quality, honor, and all. Now, that can strengthen relationship. Now, I think often we get down the road of being butterflies and sparks and that's my nigga, but I gotta ask the question, and again, I asked myself the question. I'll never come on here and not ask and then say something to you all that I ain't tried to say to myself. But in the midst of me trying to understand how I should do, what I should do, and how relevant I can be in relationship, I then asked myself, how many quality people do I have around me? Because one of the things that you'll realize, it is the people you have around you that will push you to either be a better you or the same you. So if I have quality people around me, and in every turn I make, there's a quality person to check me, then what do each and every one of those quality people do for me? They then become relevant to me in my life. Not just for knowledge, but for sharpening. As iron sharpens iron, so does a man sharpen his friend. So then you ask yourself the relevance of having quality people around you at all glance. And hear me out. There used to be a time when I was growing up, I thought it was okay to have good friends and ghetto friends. I thought it was okay to have disciplined friends and undisciplined friends. Now, understand something. You may think that won't bother you. I mean, you may think that's not going to hurt you. Let me be the first to tell you, if you really walk through self awareness, do not have anyone close to you that does not have something that they're working towards. I'm just going to be honest. I think a lot of times people go down the road of thinking, um, well, bless her heart, bless his heart. Um, They don't mean, oh, they'll grow out of it. But what if they don't? You done kept the anchor on you that kept you in your past. Now, I get it. I get it. But I'm gonna be on this relationship thing for a while. Because when you get down to it, it's almost the crux of what the podcast was really built for. It was meant to be relational conversations that often don't happen, whether it be with God, about God, or with others about God, or with God about it's meant to be conversational. So, if you think about it, at all glance, at all places of your life, you have to do your best to remain diligent in how you are relatable to others, and you got to make sure that you're doing it for quality people. And then the last thing is, you have to believe that should you do this well, that only one or two things will happen. We will either grow more together or we will eventually grow apart. God has people in your life for seasons. God has people in your life for different reasons. And when you really think about it, uh, can we honestly say that we do know how to determine the seasons of people in our life? Uh, because I'll tell you, there are times that there are seasons of people, but then there's also seasons of mindsets. And if you really understand what I mean by the season of mindsets, going back to my point of having friends and gracing friends that haven't grown out of certain behaviors and we're gracing them, but the truth be told, we're accepting their mindset. So we're trying to commingle two different mindsets, and that doesn't work. And in case you didn't know, it depends on who believes in their message the most. If you have a friend that believes in laziness more than you believe in progression, guess what you're going to start doing? Being lazy. Because the honest truth, again, this is the realness of relevant relationships. The honest truth is, if I am a person of progression and growth, and I have determined and I have identified that I have to grow and that I have the possibility of being lazy, and then I have a friend who I know engages in laziness, I have to be willing to cut that relationship off. Like I said, either we will grow together or we will grow apart. And often you have to make that determination before it's too late. Now, how do you do that? That's hard, Adam. Adam, you done told me that if somebody of my friends says something about me not being progressive, that I got to keep them in my relationship. Okay, that sounds cool, but let's talk about that for a second. All right. So if I am able to say, I know I need to grow in, put a blank there, you then put people around you who believe that is the norm. I go back to last week, we talked about James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. And one of the most powerful things he said in the book was that surround yourself around people who the person you want to be is their normal. Let me say that again. The person you wish to see and be, it is their norm. So if you want to learn to be a dedicated, well rounded husband, look for a husband where that's his norm. If I want to be a well rounded, dedicated wife, look for a wife where that is her norm and you become their friend. Because then that's a relevant relationship, because it's relevant to my growth. So again, it's either we grow together or we grow apart. Now, I know, I know. It's relationship Friday, and often when you talk about growth on podcasts and you talk about things of that nature, if it ain't too juicy, folk will jump off. But honestly, when it comes to relationships, it's one of the most pivotal things that you're gonna really have to seek God for, and you're gonna have to do some due diligence for. You know, I promised myself that I would take my time going into relationships because I wanted to going into the relationship conversation because I wanted to make sure that what we speak about on these podcasts, they're relevant, not only to the heart of God, but also they're relevant to the heart that God's placed in many of us. God has given us a heart of hope. God's giving us a heart of progression. God has given us a heart of growth and absolute hopefulness. And often when we don't give ourselves the opportunity to feed that heart, other things are fed into the same heart. So we talked about it. We talked about being relevant and allowing for yourself to know what you bring to the table in a relationship. And then we talked about what does it mean for someone to be a quality person that is not just worthy, and I don't want to say worthy, but who is who allows you to grow and be the best you so they can be the best them, and their best them allows you to be the best you, and it becomes that beautiful cycle of growth. And then the last thing, knowing that, is this relationship a relationship that I will grow in or grow out of? It's very simple. That's the simple, and that's just the high purview level. I want to dig some more into a few things, and next week, what I want to do is talk about the awareness and talk about your actual awareness of yourself with the quality people. Because in order for you to choose quality people, you have to see the qualities within yourself. And sometimes that's hard to do should you not have the right mindset to do that. And if you haven't manifested the right mindset to do that. So we'll talk about that more. But the last thing that I wanted to make sure that I gave some level of some clarity on. Often this whole word of relationship, the whole word of relationship, you know, it just means someone that I can relate to, someone that sees me, someone that understands me. And here's the thing about that. Relationship has to be something that lives in the heart and lives in the mind. Because you realize that you have to listen to what folks say. And one of the things that I know that in our current generation that has pushed people to run into relationships is this spirit of loneliness. And the spirit of loneliness that allows you to think, I need somebody around me to just talk to. I need somebody around me to say something to. Now, it's cool, but are you wanting that because you don't really like spending time with yourself? And I know that's the thing that I had to leave on, which is the thought provoking place of what is my reason for building relationships? Am I inundated with what society has told me, which is I gotta have a girl, I gotta have a man, I gotta have a husband, I gotta have a wife? Where's your heart with that? Because if you're anything like me, I struggle with it. You know, my wife is at the Sarah Jakes conference, and I, my baby boy, he called his grandma, said, "Grandma, I want us to come spend 2 nights with you," and his brother was absolutely down for it. So it left Daddy here with just the dog. I struggled a lot growing up, not wanting to be alone, and part of the reason why I really wanted to do this podcast is because I had to struggle through that little bit of former person that didn't like being alone. So I'm talking to you from that heart because I know, just like myself, at times you've had to tell yourself that you like being alone even though you don't. You've had to tell yourself that, hey, nobody's here right now, but that's okay. Singleness is power. Though it is. But what are you saying to yourself? What are the things that you're saying in your heart to yourself? And listen, I get it. I get it. But take some time to think why you build relationships, who's building the relationship, which is yourself, who you're choosing to be and build a relationship with, which are quality people, and what is the path that these relationships will have. Will we grow together or will we grow apart? That's tonight's broadcast. That's tonight's thought. Can't believe we've been on here for 30 minutes already. But listen, that's what tonight's thoughts is. And as always, listen, I want to pray with you because I believe we can have any kind of conversation and wrap it up for God to give us his thoughts about it. Can we do that? Let's pray. Father, I am in an amazing place with you right now, Dad. For as we are able to sit here and pray and talk and just commune with you, Lord, about what our relationships mean and who our relationships are with. Father, allow us to take the first step, which is not neglecting where you have us and where our mind and our heart is with you. Allow us to be aware of who you are to us and who we are to you. And even the more, God, I thank you for the opportunity, God, for us to be able to have hearts of discernment towards the ability of being able to see relationships for what they're really meant for in our lives. Father, I thank you for those who are wanting the relationships in the past, God, to be in the past and stay there, even when they start creeping their head up. So I stand in the gap for my brother or my sister, Lord, that feels that, Lord, the relationships in the past that meant them no good, that at times have strongholds on them, Lord, I pray, Father, that you will allow them to see the chains be broken off and allow them to see themselves walking further away from the past, God, that did its course and no longer has its purpose. And rightfully so, Father, I thank you for us being able to look at ourselves in the mirror and look at people around us and be able to make the qualified decision that whatever is necessary to be done, that we have the strength and the tenacity to do it. And we won't wait and delay, Father, but we will do our best to walk in that forever and always. And God, when we mess up, let us run back to this relationship with you that says grace is sufficient. For we know, God, relationship mistakes are natural and they happen often. And sometimes we need more help navigating the mistakes of relationships than the relationships themselves. So, Dad, we love you. We honor you. We bless your name. And we're thankful for your heart towards us and even the people around us. We love you, God. We honor you. We bless your name. And it's in your Son, Jesus the Christ's name, we do pray. Amen. So, beloved, listen, it is with a open heart. I just want to make sure, if you get a chance, go back, listen to the replay. And as you listen to the replay, do your best to go down the road of just being able to give yourself an opportunity to master this thing called relationships. Listen, this is ARL, and this is the Redeemed Conversations. And I'll see you next week. We will absolutely be keep talking about this even more. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, always link them below. And I love you. Nothing you can do about it. Have a great night.